in a competition, this is also a risky game to play because, it's more playing for keeps in competition. Your partner's trying to heel hook you and you're trying to toe hold them. And it's like, okay, well, someone's going to eat damage and whoever that is going to tap first, I guess, or we're going to start letting shit break.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight as Alpra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Essential Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Essential Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. And this week we're going to discuss the saddle, the honey hole, the 411, the inside sankaku, the cross Ashi, whatever you call this position. We're going to talk about every leg locker's favorite position. Before we do that, I'd like to remind you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Share the show with your friends. Leave comments in the comments section. If you want to support or contact the show, links are in the bottom. Okay, guys, so let's talk about cross Ashi garami. This is probably my favorite leg locking position for many reasons. And I would say my favorite leg lock position has changed multiple times. I used to be a big 50-50 guy, but as I progress, I'm always now finding myself looking to get to the saddle as a main finishing position. My style is based off of the Danaher Death Squad leg lock formula, I guess you could say. And I guess the story of Rob Bernacki and the Island Top Team leg lock formula started when Rob went and trained with Eddie Cummings for a week in New York. He did a week of privates and visited Henzo's. He came back with a bunch of different concepts on digging the heel, finishing, wedges, things like this. And this was all somewhat relatively new for us. And this was around the time when, of course, Eddie was successful in the competition scene. Gary Tonin was very successful, and Gordon Ryan wasn't even really around at this point. It was all about Eddie Cummings. He's kind of the godfather of modern leg locks, I guess you could say. There were guys like Riley Bodycomb, Imanari, Paul Jarez, these guys using leg locks at the highest levels of different combat sports. But Eddie Cummings was he's one of the first guys to really systemize leg locks and to enter them consistently and regularly and easily through double trouble inside position. So Eddie Cummings really paved the way for a lot of guys in the leg lock department. And it is kind of sad, I guess, what happened to him. He kind of just dropped off the face of competitive jiu-jitsu, which is really unfortunate. I heard he went back to school. He's a very, very smart guy. I'm not sure if he's a mathematician or what he is, some kind of learned person who decided to do something else with their life. And of course, now we're hearing stories about how John Danaher was abusive to him and things like that. And, that he started training at Unity, and we're all like, why did he leave Danaher? What happened? And then we heard these echoes of stories of Danaher, abusing him as a uke and whatnot. But from what I've heard, Eddie was one of the guys who brought a lot of the modern leg lock ideas to Henzo's, and even, developed a lot of the modern leg lock system himself just through countless hours of drilling in the room. And eventually there'd be guys who trained closely with Eddie Cummings, like Johnny Ocasio and John Calistine, and pretty much anyone who was in the blue basement around that time, learned from Eddie. Gordon Ryan, of course, Eddie used to always heel hook Gordon Ryan. I'm sure there was many hours when Gordon, Nicky, Gary, and Eddie would sit in the gym and sort of troubleshoot these positions. At least that's how legend has the stories anyways. But long story short, big shout out to Eddie Cummings. It's unfortunate that he doesn't really compete anymore. I don't even know if he trains that much anymore, but he was one of the guys where you just saw incredible leg lock highlights and consistent finishes through leg locks. And I'll link a highlight video in the bottom. I'm pretty sure they're out there. I'll try and find one because he was always someone that I really enjoyed watching. And huge thank you to Eddie Cummings for his contribution to the sport. So let's first talk about the advantages of the saddle. So it's an asymmetrical position, meaning you have a clear, distinctive attack advantage over your opponent. Your opponent can't really easily attack you because you have 2 feet to the inside. So your partner's leg is exposed and your legs are not exposed through double inside position. The inverted heel hook is available as the main attack from this position. There are other attacks, but that is kind of the main one. And the inverted heel hook is arguably the most powerful leg lock there is. This would be on the primary leg. The primary leg, of course, is the leg that is trapped within the opponent's Ashi garami, or I should say, if you're doing the leg lock, sorry, I'm just really tired. If you're doing the leg lock, you're attacking the primary leg. There is a secondary leg. That is the leg that we are using to control our partner, controlling their rotation. And a lot of your partner's defensive actions will come through freedom of the second leg. So your Ashi garami entangles the primary leg, and your arms basically control the secondary leg. On this leg, we can also attack this, even though attacks on legs that are not controlled through Ashi garamis are going to always be inherently weaker because we can't apply as much tension to the joint with our legs. But there are things we can do to the secondary leg. We can try to go for ankle locks and things like that. Even though I would say they're less high percentage, they are still possible. There's also a situation when we use the saddle called the top side saddle, or at least that's what I call it, where you come up on top of your opponent and you have your hips higher than their hips. And you can use this position as kind of a hub position to drop back into the legs, or to use guard passes, or if you see your partner's arm is extended and you feel like you can hit a Kimura control, you could potentially enter your partner's back through this topside saddle position. So this is also a very important position that we could use from the saddle. And that dilemma of submissions and positional advances always makes attacks more powerful. And so we can use this dilemma through the saddle. Danner always talks about using the saddle as a pin if you have both legs, which he coined the term double trouble. If you have double trouble in the saddle, it's almost like you're pinning your opponent because they can't easily move. They're being controlled in that situation for long periods of time. And so we can kind of look at the saddle as, in a way, it's a bit of a pin in that it fully immobilizes our partner when it's done correctly. Okay, let's talk about some details from the Ashi garami. One of the things I'm always thinking about is keeping my opponent's knee inside the line of their hip and their ankle. So if you take your opponent's leg and you just extend it in a straight line, you look at the line of your opponent's leg through their hip and their ankle. If that knee is rotated inward, that is the kind of tension and wedging that we want on our partner's primary leg when we have the saddle. So we want to push the knee in slightly. If you don't do this, then your partner will easily be able to extract their knee line. Okay, and anytime our partner extracts their knee line, it's very, very difficult to attack any kind of rotational submission. We could look at, with different foot positions, a full triangle versus a semi-triangle or crossed ankles. This position, full triangle, generally has less wedging power in the cross Ashi garami because a full triangle involves you having more space in between your knees. And when more space are in between your knees, your wedges are generally looser. That's not to say we won't use a full triangle when we're controlling certain leg entanglements, but in this position, I think it's smarter to go with crossed ankles. So another thing we want to think about is your knees are basically going to be pointing in the exact same direction and going to be around the same height. Okay, so when you cross your ankles, that's what your leg should look like. When you do a full triangle, we all know what a triangle looks like, right? Another foot position you could go into, it would be the prayer position, or where your feet are stomped. I usually do this because I have short legs. I love to stomp my feet. Sometimes I cross my feet as well. So this prayer position is very, very popular. There's different variations of shoelace Ashi. There's a shoelace Ashi where your feet are open and you are basically just hooking your shoelaces under your partner's hamstrings. A good example of this would be, I believe, when Craig Jones submitted Tex Johnson years ago with the inside heel hook. And then there's also closed shoelace Ashi, which Eddie Cummings has hit before in competition, where you have a full triangle and your foot is so deep through because of the full triangle that your foot has actually wrapped around your partner's near hamstring and glute muscle. And so this closed shoelace Ashi is very, very tight, but I also find you kind of lock yourself in with this position. So generally speaking, I like to cross my feet or stomp my feet in the prayer position. And there's different grips, of course. We could talk about different grips from the saddle. One of them would be, of course, we mentioned double trouble. Double trouble is the idea of your Ashi garami controlling your partner's primary leg and your arms controlling your partner's secondary leg. The primary leg is the real target, but the secondary leg is also available. This double trouble is something that we're always looking to get when we're going to the saddle, when we're looking to control the position for long periods of time. Another control position would be the tombstone. This is where let's say we lose control of our partner's secondary leg. Maybe it's out of reach or it's slipped away, and we feel like we need to prevent our partner from doing a spinning escape. And so what we can do is we can take 2 grips on our partner's feet, one at the heel and one at the toes, and we can lock our partner's foot in dorsiflexion. And in doing so, with our partner's foot locked at a 90-degree angle, it's very, very difficult for them to turn because it feels like they are heel hooking themselves. This tombstone control is a really, really powerful position. I've been playing it a lot lately. One thing I like about the tombstone control is that your partner, if you have a double trouble, your partner knows what you want to do. Generally, you'll create some kind of a diversion and attack the secondary leg. And then as they pull out the secondary leg, you actually hit your true attack on the primary leg. This comes with a problem. The central problem of double trouble is a knowledgeable leg locker will know that this dilemma is happening, and they will know that once the secondary leg escapes, that's their window of escape, and they are hiding their heel and making it really, really difficult for you to catch heel exposure in this moment. They know that it's coming, they're anticipating it, and then they escape. So focusing all of your attention on the primary leg and using the tombstone control is a great remedy for this problem, because there is no switch from secondary to primary leg. You have 2 hands on the primary leg, and then you go immediately into a heel hook dig, usually using a front shift, or you could pass the foot off to the other side and attack an inside Ashi garami, which we will talk about later on in the show. Of course, there's false grips. False grips are scoop grips that we use in our partner's knee. Sometimes we can scoop over the top, which is, I think, the easiest thing to do. Other times we can bring our scoop grip under our partner's knee. And what these grips do, they're very, very strong grips. They prevent our partner from extracting their knee line, and they also keep our partner's leg locked at 90 degrees, or at least 45 degrees-ish, we'll say. So false grips are really, really good at securing the knee line, keeping the leg bent, and also taking a false grip will help you generate heel exposure, especially when our partner knows you're trying to get heel exposure and they're turning their knee out, hiding their heel. So false grips, generally when I'm digging a heel hook, I like to scoop at the knee and sort of rotate it inward as I'm getting my dig. And in doing so, you generate more heel exposure. You could also do things like passing the secondary leg across the center line. Gordon calls it a Dracula, when you sort of shelf the secondary leg and you're in this, well, actually, I believe Dan coined this, and your hands are crossed over the top, controlling the secondary leg, much like how Dracula is supposed to have slept in the coffin, I guess. They got these funny names for everything, right? And then taking that leg and passing it across the center line. And when you do this, it's pretty much impossible for your partner to hide their heel. You can go in now and attack the primary leg with the secondary leg already passed to and across the center line. Let's talk about some digging mechanics. Digging the heel is a skill that takes a lot of practice. I've had many competitions where I've had to dig on a heel, and because my dig mechanics were not good and my control mechanics were not good, I lost the heel. And this is a really, really common problem when people start learning leg locks, and I think it's important that everyone learns dig mechanics the right way, so we'll just go right into it. Of course, we're trying to just create heel exposure, right? And again, I already discussed using false grips over our partner's IT band, rotating the knee, catching the dig on the heel. The main rule that I find very, very useful is the idea of your forearm being parallel with your partner's foot. So if you can close your elbow to your body and have your forearm line up with your partner's foot, that's where you're going to get very, very sticky dig mechanics. So let's say I now go to dig my partner's heel, and my forearm is parallel with my partner's shin. This is going to require me to have an open elbow. And when I have an open elbow, I'm not immobilizing my partner's toes. And really, when we're digging the heel, the goal is to immobilize our partner's toes, not necessarily immobilize our partner's heel. So that's the common misconception. So when we dig, we kind of do this movement where we close our elbow to our hip and sort of lock our elbow against our hip, and our hand is flaring out. And when you do this, you get the most sticky grips of all, because you're forcing your partner's foot into that 90-degree bend. When our partner's foot is pointing forward in a ballerina style posture, that's where the heel hooks become difficult, but the ankle locks become easier. And so what we want to do is take that foot from a plantar flexion and bring it into dorsiflexion by closing our elbow and flaring our hand out and putting our forearm in a parallel line with our partner's foot. This is so, so important. Failure to do so, you're going to get a lot of heel slippage happening. And also you'll get probably a lot of bruises on your forearm from having a dig that focuses on the heel rather than immobilizing the toes. So as a general rule, when you're digging heel hooks, think about immobilizing your partner's toes rather than digging the heel. Like I already mentioned, when you go to double trouble, that window of escape is the number one issue with having double trouble. And so what you could do is you could potentially reverse engineer the sequence. In the classic sequence we're discussing here, we do a leg entry, maybe we get to a saddle, we get double trouble. From here, I've got to separate my partner's legs, usually by either a Dracula or perhaps I go for an ankle lock and my partner withdraws their secondary leg from the ankle lock, and that leaves me an opportunity to dig the heel. Once I get the heel exposure, I get the dig, and then I go into my break, right? This is like the classic sequence: entry, double trouble, separate, dig, break. But you could also reverse engineer the sequence. So for example, let's say I'm passing your guard and I do a leg drag movement. I shelf the leg on my hip, and then immediately I get the dig first this time. I don't even have an Ashi garami. I just have maybe two knees pinching around your leg, right? I throw in my dig. I've already caught the heel. My other hand is taking a scoop grip on the knee. And then from here, I can fall back into an Ashi garami. And I could just throw my leg over the top. I could throw my inside leg over the top from the inside into like a 50-50. I could just literally throw my feet onto your stomach and stomp. Doesn't really have to be pretty. I just need to prevent your hips from rising. And in this way, you can get heel hooks where you catch the dig before you actually get your Ashi garami. The result, it's a much more sudden, surprising heel hook attack. So you're doing the digging first, then you establish Ashi garami, then you get the break. And in doing so, you don't have that sort of central problem of the window of escape, so to speak, where your partner has to, or where you, if you're attacking, where you have to get rid of the secondary leg and then go in on the primary leg. There is no secondary primary leg issue. There is no double trouble. You just fall right back into the heel hook. And I think it's good to have enough diversity in your leg lock game where you can enter in both ways, right? You can get the dig first, or you can get the position first, control it for long amounts of time versus surprising your opponent. Let's also just talk about the inside Ashi dilemma. There will be times when you have a cross Ashi and you are trying to get a heel hook and your partner's turning. So they're defending the saddle position. And then if you know that there's no chance that you're going to get the inside heel hook, sometimes what you can do is just fall back and pass that foot to the other side of your body to a straight position. And when the foot goes to a straight position, now you're going to be able to throw your feet are already on the inside. You're going to be able to go right into an inside Ashi garami. And this is what Gordon got Nicky Rod with at ADCC, was the inside Ashi garami. All right, so now we've gone to the saddle. Let's discuss strong side versus weak side. So I don't know if everyone calls it this. Basically, strong side is my hips facing up towards the ceiling. Weak side would be my hips facing down towards the ceiling, down towards the floor. So in these two positions, I think, if you're going to be a master of leg locks, you got to be able to attack both facing up and facing down. But preferably, we'd like to attack on the strong side where our hips are facing up. And the reason being is because our partner is now far away from their planned escape, okay? Generally in the saddle, our partner wants to turn their foot down, turn away from us, and start clearing the knee that way. If they spin the other way, then they just expose their heel and they get finished. So they can't turn towards the heel hook. They have to turn away from it. So if my partner's turning away when I'm in the saddle, and I feel like there's no way I'm going to catch a bite on the heel, I can just pick the foot up and pass it to the other side, start attacking outside heel hooks from the inside Ashi garami. I could start attacking Z-locks. Those are usually the two attacks that you're going to look to do. Sometimes you can wrestle up from these positions, okay? Those are kind of the main options. One rule that I really think is important when we're attacking heels is a rule that I call the rule of perpendicular legs. Okay, I don't know what to call it. It's just the idea of when we dig a heel, I want my hips pointing laterally through my partner's knee. So if I was going to attack an inside heel hook, I want my hips to face through my partner's knee from the outside facing in. So I'm bridging into the inside of my partner's knee. If I'm doing an outside heel hook, it'd be the reverse. Now my hips are on the inside and my knees are facing outside, I'm putting in hip pressure facing outside. But the force vector of my hips applying force is always going to be laterally through the knee. I never want to apply my force straight into the knee. I want to go almost through the side of the knee, okay? So if I'm going to look for digs and look for the best position that I can apply a strong dig and a strong finish, I would want to get to this angle where my shins are basically in a perpendicular line with my partner's shins, or my body is oriented perpendicular to my partner's body. This is a really, really important concept because you don't want to spend times where your partner's turning their knee out and your knees are lining up in the same line and you're wondering, why can't I get a dig from here? It's because your body orientation is not in the correct position. What you could do is you could create a roll, which I do a lot, create a roll. You're going to cover some distance, but during this roll, you can get ahead of your partner and go into this perpendicular position where you could get a bite on their leg. You could potentially get a finishing grip. When we're finishing facing up, so on the strong side now, if I get a heel hook and we're facing up, generally what I want to do, just like all heel hooks, I put the joint under tension by pulling my hands towards my face, pull my face towards my hands, kind of like a shrugging movement. And then my hands continue to pull up and over my face, and then my hips start to drive in. When we're facing up, we want our hips to go sideways through our knee. In this case, our knees are going to be facing up, and we're going to splay our knees while stomping down on our partner's hip or locking a triangle with our legs and extending our hips down to put any kind of wedge on our partner's hip. We got to keep our partner's hips down if we want to apply pressure through the knee. So again, there's that golden rule of joint attacks. If I'm going to attack a joint, I need to immobilize the joint above that joint. If I want to attack your foot, I need to immobilize your knee. If I want to attack your knee, I got to immobilize your hip, etc. Okay, if I'm going to face down and finish a heel hook, then in this case, I'm going to be using a pinch of my knees, squeezing my knees together, which is going to put side pressure into your knee, and I'm going to hip into the side of the knee. Right? If you really think about what a heel hook does, or any rotational submission, it's always two opposing forces shearing each other. So I'm pushing your knee inward and I'm pulling your toes outward, right? This shearing force is what's breaking your knee and / ankle. And because your foot is locked in a right angled position, right? A dorsiflexion, that is going to make it extremely difficult for your partner to relieve any of this rotational pressure. Whereas if your partner was able to ballerina their toes down, they would have a better chance of sort of sliding past and preventing shearing force going into the ankle and knee. Okay, so facing up, we're going to be bridging and splaying knees. Facing down on the weak side, we're going to be pinching knees and hipping down into the floor. In terms of dig mechanics, we already talked about bringing our elbow in, but Gordon calls this the cowboy drill. It's a movement as if you are simulating pulling out a pistol, drawing it, and then pointing it at your partner, bringing your elbow in and flaring your hand out, essentially. And once you start buying into this pistol movement, this cowboy drill, as he calls it, I know when I started using it, my dig mechanics increased like 30% probably, just because I was naturally just bringing it in the right position, okay? Sometimes we'll even dig during a roll, and as we're rolling, we're facing down. When we dig, we don't necessarily do this cowboy drill, but I take my knuckles and put it on my back. And then, so I overshoot the grip. Knuckles on the back, and then from here, again, pull the pistol out, and you can catch really nice digs. This is Gordon Ryan detail from Attacking the Legs. Huge detail. That cowboy drill really helped me dial in mechanics and teach good mechanics to my students. And like I said, when we're finishing heel hooks, we're kind of looking to drive our hips laterally through our partner's knee, as we always do. We never want to apply pressure that is running in the same line as our partner's shin and knee, but rather side on. And that is really how we're going to apply braking power from the heel hook. Okay. And we'll just talk about some entries now. Of course, we can enter from top and bottom. Let's talk about bottom position for a second. One of the main concepts Gordon always talks about, and basically I would say the main concept, the backbone concept of Gordon and Danaher's philosophy to jiu-jitsu is just always dominate the inside position. Always get hands and feet to the inside position. So just take like a butterfly guard. Butterfly guard leads to X guard, Ashi garami, leg attacks, And when you have 2 feet to the inside, you're playing butterfly guard, your guard retention just improves naturally. Okay. I always see guys that love playing half guard in the gi, and then they play no gi and they're starting to get crushed chest to chest. And they're wondering like, and people are backstepping into their legs and they're like, why do people keep backstepping my legs and why do they keep smashing me chest to chest? I'm saying, because you're playing a half guard. You can play a half guard. There's many people who use half guard successfully in no-gi, but I just think it is more of a precarious guard to play when there are leg attacks available. And also against good guard passers that are really good at getting chest to chest, you want to always dominate the inside space with all 4 limbs. So generally speaking, I try and get my beginners and my kids to play no-gi where they're always getting 2 feet to the inside. It's just guard retention is so much easier when you have 2 feet inside. You can elevate your partner. You can enter Ashi garami. Like I said, I think it's just a better position to attack and play guard from in a no-gi position, in a no-gi situation. So any Ashi garami entries we're going to try and make, we're going to get 2 hands to the floor. Sorry, we're going to get 2 feet to the inside, and we're going to get 2 hands to the floor. So anytime we can put our partner's hands on the floor, our partner's hands are not attacking us. And this is a very important concept to learn when you're a beginner, is that from the bottom, if the top player's hands are not on the floor, they're going to start fucking you up. So it's really, really important to always be off balancing them so much that they have to post their hands on the floor. If you can get your partner's hands on the floor with 2 feet to the inside, and you can bring your partner's hips over your head, you're going to enter a lot of different leg locks. That is kind of my formula. Hands on the floor, 2 feet inside, partner's hips over the head. You can do these things, you can get into Ashi garami. Okay, there are other ways that we can enter from the bottom, like you could invert to the inside, like an Imanari roll. Okay, you could go for a sumigai Ashi from the butterfly guard. Your partner posts out, and you can invert upside down into the saddle. These are kind of the main ways I would say you would get to the saddle from the bottom position. And of course, from these positions, it's always going to be easier to enter the saddle in a seated position, because a seated guard, like a butterfly guard, will allow you to pull your opponent back over top of you with a rounded body and get them to post hands on the floor. Whereas if you're on your back in a supine position, I'm not going to say you can't enter the saddle, but it's hard to generate backward kazushi from that position. Or should I say forward kazushi, actually, pulling your partner on top of you. We could also enter cross Ashi from the top. So if I split my partner's legs and I'm passing my partner, let's say in a split squat or headquarters, that's where you can backstep into the saddle. We can threaten guard passes with leg attack entries. And when we backstep into the saddle from the top position, that gives us an opportunity to enter the topside saddle, which I mentioned earlier, gives us access to submissions, and it gives us access to back takes and guard passes, whether we're going to roll for a Kimura if we see our partner's arm extended behind us, or if we can punch an underhook and go into knee cut passes. This is kind of a hub position that I'm always looking for, okay? The topside saddle position, which is basically a shade away from the reverse Ashi garami position. The reverse Ashi garami, if you're not aware, that's a position that joins together the outside Ashi and the inside sankaku. So you can go cross Ashi, go outside Ashi through this reverse Ashi position. Plus, there's a ton of cool submissions you can attack there, toe holds and knee bars and all types of IBJJF legal stuff from that position. Okay. Let's discuss some escapes, because number one thing that I always get asked from people who are new to leg locks, it's always escapes first, which makes sense. You should learn escapes first so that you're not immediately getting leg locked. You understand what your partner needs to get what they need to get their leg attacks. And once you can deny them their leg attacks, you know what they need. You can now survive with them, hang with them, and you just learn how to apply leg locks from a defensive perspective first. It's always good to learn how to shut things down first. And I would say my main leg escape concepts, in no particular order, would be these. First of all, prevent immediate heel exposure. Like, don't be sticking your foot out there, putting the boot on when you're trying to hide heel hooks, because your 90-degree foot will be, very ripe for the digging if left in the wrong hands. So always pointing the foot down, turning the foot to hide the heel exposure. Second thing, get into base. This is a huge one. People try and pummel their legs back to the inside position, which is the next concept. You try and pummel your feet back to the inside position, then you can't do that in some situations unless you post a hand on the floor and get your hips off the floor. Getting your hips off the floor allows you to pummel your legs into positions without being overly flexible. Plus, there are going to be times when your partner starts attacking legs and you need to stand up to defend leg attacks. And this involves you just posting a hand on the floor and heisting up and getting into base. Okay, so prevent immediate heel exposure, get into base, pummel back to the inside position. So always 2 feet back to the inside. If you each have a leg exposed, you're in either in a 50-50 or you're in some variation of a mutual Ashi, meaning that you're both exposed. In these types of situations, always just try to get 2 feet back to the inside. You can be a kind of a crazy asshole and go into leg attacks when your partner is attacking you, but I would recommend, just some words of advice, avoid going into shootouts when you're going for leg locks. If you do this in the training room, you're going to get into situations where it's kind of a game of chicken and someone's going to tap, perhaps possibly too late in a competition. This is also a risky game to play because, it's more playing for keeps in competition. Your partner's trying to heel hook you and you're trying to toe hold them. And it's like, okay, well, someone's going to eat damage and whoever that is going to tap first, I guess, or we're going to start letting shit break. And this is just not a smart way to fight. This is the equivalent of being in a cage and 2 guys are swinging at each other and someone's going to get knocked out. It's just, is it entertaining? Yes, it's awesome to watch. Is it an intelligent way, intelligent way to fight, especially when there's, really grave injuries on the line? No, it's not very intelligent at all. And you shouldn't get caught in these shootouts. You should always just pummel 2 feet to the inside position. Okay, another concept that can help you with your escapes: disrupt your partner's Ashi garami. So control the ends of their feet as levers, untangle their legs. We call open feet open circuit and we call closed feet closed circuit. Okay. And when our partner's feet are open and we're controlling them at the ends of the levers, or we're increasing the space between the knees, your partner significantly loses braking pressure. Okay. And when your partner significantly loses braking pressure, they can have a dig on your heel, but because there's no wedges around the hip and knee, you can spin out generally and stay safe. So disrupting your partner's Ashi garami and increasing the space between their knees and their feet really helps you escape leg locks. That's very, very important to understand, because if you just spin out of a leg entanglement, but you don't do anything to disrupt the Ashi garami, your partner has good wedges, they're going to follow you. You're going to keep spinning. You're not going to get anywhere because the legs are still going to be strong, and then you're going to get heel hooked as you're spinning. Whereas if you open your partner's legs and start spinning, now you can do the next concept, which is clearing the knee line. Okay, clearing the knee line where you escape your knee line. Remember, we talked earlier in the show, if your partner wants to apply braking pressure to one of your joints, they have to immobilize the joint above that joint. So if they want to attack your ankle or your knee, then they have to immobilize the knee and or the hip as well, the next joint up the leg. And then lastly, the last concept would be disconnect. So get back to a neutral cycle, just break free of the leg entanglement, or re-attack. Sit in the pocket, re-pummel your leg back inside. Now you're going on the attack with leg locks. Okay. So again, those leg lock escape concepts, not in any order because they could happen in different orders. Prevent immediate heel exposure with good foot positioning. Get into base. Pummel 2 feet back to the inside position. Disrupt the Ashi garami by increasing the space between the attacker's knees or feet. Usually this is done by separating the wedges and controlling the ends of the legs as levers. Clear the knee line and disconnect, meaning reset, or re-attack, re-pummel, and re-attack your partner's legs yourself. Or maybe you escape and you go right onto an attack chain where you're passing the guard or taking the back or sweeping, right? All right, let's just talk about what I believe is probably the best all-purpose escape from the saddle. It's kind of a hybrid between a rising escape and a turning escape, I guess you could say. I call it the L escape because you're moving your body like an L, or sometimes I call it a corner escape, meaning I'm going to sort of scoot my butt around the corner. So I know that if I just turn away in the cross Ashi, yes, I did prevent my partner from exposing my heel, but if I just turn away, often my back is exposed. If I don't have anything in the way of that, my partner can now just take their reaping leg over and start attacking my back, right? And I like to post my hand on my partner's reaping leg, which seems kind of crazy because you're kind of locking yourself in a reap. But if you think about it, this does two things. It prevents my partner from taking the leg out and attacking my back. and it allows me to generate base. So when I'm posting on my partner's foot, I'm able to lift my butt off the floor, and this allows me to move my hips in a position where I can pummel my free leg back underneath and stomp my partner's hamstring, if that makes sense. So I've posted on the leg, I've heisted my hips up just a little bit. I don't want to heist up too much, because if I heist up too much, my partner can actually invert underneath and attack me, which we saw Gordon Ryan do to Mateus Denise. And then all I need to do is pummel my free leg inside my partner's hamstring. And when I do that, I can actually separate their legs by extending my partner's hamstring and pulling their free leg and pulling their reaping leg towards me, which basically makes them do the splits. Gordon calls this stretch Ashi. Okay, stretch Ashi garami is any time where I can extend my partner's legs open. And what this does is it prevents my partner from repummeling me immediately, and it prevents my partner from standing up immediately. So I can transition to different variations of Ashi garami when I put my partner into a stretch Ashi. So again, just as a recap, my partner had a saddle on me, and then I pushed down on the reaping leg. I started heisting up, pummeling my free leg inside their hamstring. And then from here, I opened their legs. And so once you open their legs, your knee line is completely safe. You can start to rotate or whatever. And if your partner has a dig, they can't apply any braking pressure because they need a strong Ashi garami to apply braking pressure. There is one more sequence I want to talk about, and that is what some call it the honey stick, I believe. Or maybe I'm wrong. I actually, I'm a pretty decent leg locker, and I'm not sure the verbiage on this. I've also heard of the term Philly saddle. It might not be the same position. So, you can let me know in the comments. I'm sure all you haters will. But it's basically a position where your partner has the saddle on you, and they actually leave a space exposed in between their legs where you can pummel your free leg inside and actually trap them in some kind of a locked, almost like an outside Ashi position, but their feet are locked in such a way that they can't easily extract their leg. Their sankaku has locked themselves in the position. And when this happens, you can still be heel hooked if they separate your feet, but you could also make attacks on your partner's exposed leg, and they don't have a secondary leg to protect that heel. So if you get caught in this position, it is pretty powerful. I think it's called the honey stick, but I'm not actually sure the exact name. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some predictable escapes and how we can counter them. So we already talked about our partner heisting up too high. When our partner's hips raise too high as they're defending the saddle, we can invert underneath. And this is really, really a smart move. I actually first learned it when Oliver Taza came and trained with us, and he did a couple seminars at On Guard. And one of the moves he kept hitting on us when we would heist up from the saddle is he would just spin underneath. And when you spin underneath, you have a quicker roll than if you were to, let's say, spin over your forehead, like hot dog style. Okay. So if you roll over your forehead, yes, you can get heel exposure, but it's a roll that it takes longer to roll to the other side. Whereas if you invert underneath, it's a very, very short roll. So in doing so, you can catch the heel. Again, I would say check out Gordon Ryan, Mateus Denise. That match was amazing. And that's what he did. He caught him in the heel hook, had his dig. He looked right at him, waited a couple seconds. Mateus waited, and then he just tapped out. He's like, okay, you got me. So again, amazing confidence from Gordon Ryan when he catches a submission on an ADCC champion like Mateus Denise. And then he's like, I don't need to rip this. I know I have you. There's no reason for me to, put you on the shelf for a year or whatever. And he could have ripped it, and he chose not to. So sportsman-like, and also just shows that he had full control over the situation. And Mateus was dead to rights. All right, I'd like to contrast the saddle and the 50-50 position. So just understand that both of these positions, the saddle and the 50-50, give access to the inverted heel hook. Okay, 50-50, however, both people have access to the 50-50 heel hook. It is, in the 50-50 position, both athletes have access to the inverted heel hook, whereas in the saddle, only one of the athletes can access the inverted heel hook. So because of the asymmetrical quality of the cross Ashi garami, I generally favor cross Ashi garami. Okay, it's 50-50 is just, you could also get attacked in that position. One thing Gordon says is, if you are way better than your opponent in leg locks, it's not a bad idea to go to the 50-50 position. But if you feel like your partner is outclassing you in leg locks, you probably want to get to a more asymmetrical position, and you'd want to avoid a position like 50-50 if you know that your opponent is much more advanced than you in the leg lock department. In the saddle position, we actually want to deny our opponent the ability of gaining access to both of my legs. So I don't want my opponent to control both of my feet in the saddle. If they do that, they have double trouble. Now I'm going to have trouble spinning out. Basically, if I'm going to do an escape, I got to free my secondary leg first. And as I free my secondary leg, I need to watch that my opponent doesn't immediately start attacking the primary leg in the process. Whereas in a 50-50, you actually want to cross your feet. The double trouble is a good thing in 50-50. Your partner can't easily control double trouble. They can do it, but they can't do it as advantageously as they can in the saddle. In 50-50 though, if you dip your knee to the inside and get the inside knee position, and then you go into double trouble, that is an asymmetrical position because we call that, because you have the inside knee, we call that the 80-20 position. That is, I would say, asymmetrical for sure. Understand that when you're in the inside sankaku, the saddle, there's a top wedge. Your leg coming over the top is going to prevent your partner from turning. It's going to prevent your partner from turning into you. But your partner has the ability to turn away from you in the saddle. Okay, in a 50-50 situation, instead of a leg coming over the top, it's a leg coming from underneath, wrapping around. And what this means is you have to turn inward to escape. You can't turn outward because your partner's bottom leg will stop your rotation. Okay. In the saddle, if your partner is escaping, there's often opportunities for you to take their back. But in a 50-50, as your partner is escaping, it's very difficult to take your partner's back, and it's very difficult for your partner to take your back as well. So very, very different positions, even though to the untrained eye, they might look very similar because they both do give access to the inside heel hook. But because we're looking for inside heel hook, we're still looking for dig mechanics on the same move. Both the heel hook from 50-50 and inside sankaku rely on this rule that I was talking about, the angle of perpendicular legs. Okay. So because of that rule being true in both of those positions, we're still always looking to get ideally like a scoop grip on the knee while the other hand goes to work attacking a dig on the heel. At least that's how I like to do it. I like to scoop the knee. I'm not a big fan of scooping the Achilles grip as I'm going for a heel hook because the Achilles grip does not control my partner's knee. And when I don't control my partner's knee, I don't control the end of the lever to their hip. Okay. When I can rotate their knee inward, or I should say outward, I have more access to the inside heel hook. I can decelerate their turn away from me as I access the inside heel hook. And just keep in mind, we discussed switching from different leg entanglement positions. You can manipulate the leg position as you dig the heel. So if I'm in a 50-50, I could transition to X legs where I throw my outside leg on the inside. I could transition to what they call outside sankaku, or Gordon Ryan calls that a far hip Ashi, where you basically take your 50-50 and you transition your leg across the far hip. I actually really like this position. What this does is it allows you to make an offensive roll so you can chase the heel. And because your leg is now going across your partner's hip, your partner is going to have a hard time using their hands to control your head and disrupt your dig because you've thrown a leg in the way, essentially. Okay. If you're in a saddle, you can change your leg positioning to attack more diverse attacks. So I could go from the saddle, go in for my dig, and then from there throw my bottom leg in and transition it into a 50-50. Sometimes I'll do this when my partner is turning away. I'll switch my legs and I'll start making an offensive roll to chase the heel. Alternatively, we could use the move that we talked about earlier, the transition from inside sankaku to inside Ashi, where we just take the foot and pass it to the outside. Now we can go right into our heel hooks, or we could transition into Z-locks, sometimes even with a spin. Okay. Sometimes our partner spins and we chase and we can catch a heel hook on the outside. Check out Diego Pato and Kennedy Maciel, Cobrinha's boy, at the last ADCC, and you'll see an incredible Z-lock. All right, let's talk just before we get out of here, just some general reflections on the saddle. So just understand 50-50, it's a good place to heel hook your opponent, but I would only go there now if I feel like I'm more advanced than my opponent is in leg locks. If you feel like in your gut that you're a better leg locker than your opponent, going to 50-50 is a decent place. But if your opponent's super good at leg locks and you know that, going to that position could be trouble, but it could also just be really, really hard to get anywhere, okay? It's actually a really easy position to defend, I find, 50-50, if you can, if you know about how to defend. And generally what you want to do is just prevent them from turning down to the floor in the 80-20 position, preventing them from getting the inside knee, and not letting them create extension. Usually we're going to grab their forearm and their head and pull them in tight as we can and not let them turn away. So if you can do that, I mean, it's actually really easy to defend heel hooks from the 50-50. You just need to know what to do, just like anything else. I would say saddle is more preferable against a good leg locker, where you need to have your legs in a position where you can attack and they cannot easily attack you. And that's why I prefer the inside sankaku. Everyone has different preferences though. I know really high level leg lockers that prefer 50-50 as a position to the saddle. I know Lachlan was doing that for a while. P.O. Leclerc was, 50-50 is a big part of his game. I think you need to be a master of all these different positions, but I think true masters of leg attacks, and again, I don't like the term master, but true masters of leg attacks prefer the saddle position because it is asymmetrical. Okay. And I think that it's just harder to get countered from that position. When you're digging from 50-50, sometimes you expose your own heel. In the saddle, you don't really have that issue. If I could finish an inside heel hook from any situation, it would be probably the saddle or the backside saddle, right? I think all leg lockers should spend significant time in the saddle from both an offensive and defensive perspective so that you get really good at clearing your knee and doing all the things we talked about, preventing the heel exposure, even letting your opponent get digs. If you trust your partner, let them get digs on you and then see if you can heel slip past the dig. The heel slip is probably, the latest stage defense for any heel hook. And that is where your partner physically has a dig and you're able to slip your foot out to safety. So practicing in all different stages, double trouble, they're starting to get the dig. Now they have a dig. We're going to spar all these positions and try and do it in a safe way. Okay. Obviously, I would say this is for more advanced players, but that is something that I would recommend if you want to get really, really good at finishing and defending from the saddle. All leg lockers that want to call themselves masters of leg locks, they need to have a strong saddle game. Make sure that when you look at the saddle, look at it as a pin as well as a finishing position, because then you'll be able to use that to immobilize them for long periods of time. You'll be able to attack your opponent, not just with leg locks, but at the same time use the dilemma of leg locks and a sweep, leg locks and a guard pass, leg locks and a back take. So you're using a submission dilemma coupled with positional advancing. And this is really where I think leg locks become where they take someone's game and they make it exceptional, where your game is using leg locks, not just to finish matches and not just get a submission, but you look at it as a way to create a reaction that will set up something better. Okay. And a big skill that is important for a leg locker is to know when a leg lock is going to fail. If you can tell when a leg lock is going to fail, then you can predict when you should stop attacking the leg and start making a positional advancement. If you can do this, then you will always be a step ahead in the offensive cycle when you're attacking the legs. You could also attack legs and transition upper body to lower body. Let's say if your partner's on their knees. I do this all the time, and vice versa. You attack the upper body, they posture up, you go to the lower body. Now you attack the lower body, they start becoming heavy on you. Go back upstairs, start attacking triangles and arm bars, which is going to leave a reaction where they posture up, go back to the legs. It's just a cycle. We can always attack our partner's legs from these different positions. And for different purposes. It's kind of like a kimura, how you can use a kimura to attack your opponent and pass the guard and take the back and do all types of things using this submission system. So it's not just a finishing position. And I think the best use of leg locks is not just finishing them, but finding where you can plug them into everywhere, every part of your jiu-jitsu to just give that extra dimension, that extra dilemma in all those different situations I just discussed. Make sure that you invest in the cross Ashi, because that, I believe, is the ideal position. Find ways to get there, find ways to exit it, find how you can use it to create, again, more dilemmas that will make your game so much more potent. And if your opponent's always expecting guard passing from you and then you backstep into a saddle, that's a great attack to have, right? I think Oliver Taz are probably one of the best in the game who does that, and one of the most known guys who does that, and he still gets it even though his opponents know that he's going to do it. Okay, guys, and that's our show on the saddle. I hope you enjoyed it. I just wanted to say this is a very late show that I'm recording. It's 2:40 on Sunday night. So again, I haven't gone to Vegas yet. I'm going Tuesday morning. So when you hear this episode, if you check my Instagram, you'll see how I did at Masters Worlds and Jiu Jitsu Con, but I can't really talk about it on this episode because I haven't done it yet. I just need to get episodes in the bank for you guys. But I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope it wasn't boring and you were able to visualize some of the mechanics as I was describing it. If you like this content, please like, share, subscribe, leave comments in the comment section. If you want to support or contact the show, there's links in the bottom. You guys know where to find me there. Please subscribe to my online academy for $10 a month. It would really, really help. Everyone can spare $10 a month, I think. Come on, I give you this awesome show. I give it to you once a week. And also, if you have ideas, things you want me to go over, if you have questions for me, just email me, text me on Instagram. I swear, if it's a good question, I will address it on the show. And if there's anything you want to see out of me topic-wise, I'm always open for criticism and suggestions. Anyways, guys, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to go to bed. I'm tired as fuck right now. But just remember that the Essential Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you know, but Just remember, the Essential Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. I'm going to bed. See you guys. Peace.